In 2007, a young French animator named Ben Bocquelet was working at Cartoon Network Studios Europe in London, helping other people pitch their shows. He wasn't creating his own stuff. He was the guy behind the curtain, polishing other people's ideas, making their presentations look good, helping them sell concepts to the network. And he had a drawer full of characters that nobody wanted. They were reject designs, failed pitches, characters he'd made for commercials and short films that had been passed over, shelved, forgotten. A blue cat, a goldfish, a balloon, a piece of toast, a cloud, a dinosaur. None of them fit together. None of them belonged in the same world. And that was exactly the point. Because when Cartoon Network finally told Bocquelet to pitch his own show, he did something that nobody expected. He took every single one of those rejected characters and put them in the same school. The original pitch was dark. It was about discarded cartoon characters attending a remedial school, all of them aware that they'd been thrown away by their creators. All of them trying to find purpose in a world that had already decided they weren't good enough. The producers at Cartoon Network thought it was too sad, too bleak for a children's network. So Bocquelet revised it, softened the edges, built it into something that looked like a family sitcom mixed with a school show. But the DNA of that original concept, the idea that these characters are all, in some fundamental way, mistakes, never went away. It just went underground. It hid behind the comedy and the chaos and the visual madness. And if you watch all 240 episodes of The Amazing World of Gumball, plus the 40 episodes of the revival, you can feel it pulsing underneath everything, like a heartbeat nobody talks about. And here's the thing about Bocquelet that I think informs everything about this show. Before Cartoon Network Studios Europe, he worked at a London animation studio called Studio AKA, where he created characters for commercials and short films. Most of those characters got rejected. Most of those projects never saw the light of day. Bocquelet was, in a very real sense, a person whose creations kept getting thrown away. And when he finally got the chance to make his own show, he built it around the question that had defined his career. What happens to the things nobody wants? I think that question is the engine of the entire series. It's what drives The Void. It's what drives Rob's arc. It's what drives the show's visual aesthetic. Characters made from different media, different styles, different animation traditions, all thrown together into one school, one town, one show. As if someone opened a drawer full of rejected ideas and said, "You're all going to live together, and you're going to make it work." The chaos isn't random. It's deliberate. It's the show's answer to the question of what happens to discarded things. They find each other. So tonight, we're going to tell the entire story. Not just the plot, the story. How this show was born, how it grew up, how it changed, how it broke its own rules, how it almost ended, how it came back. Every season, every major turning point, every moment that matters. From the first frame to the most recent episode, this is the full journey through Elmore. If you're watching this late at night, get comfortable. We're going to be here for a while. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. It really does help us keep making these for you. Grab a blanket, close your eyes if you want. I'll paint the pictures for you. Let's start at the beginning, the real beginning. The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on May 3rd, 2011 in the United States, with a sneak peek of the episode, the DVD, airing after the premiere of the Looney Tunes show. The full series launched on May 9th with the DVD and The Responsible. And from the very first frame, it was clear that this show was doing something that nobody else on television was doing. The visual style. I need to talk about the visual style first, because if you've never seen Gumball, this is the thing that hits you before anything else. And if you have seen it, you probably take it for granted by now. But you shouldn't, because it's genuinely unprecedented in television animation. Every character is animated in a different style. Gumball Watterson, our protagonist, a 12-year-old blue cat, is traditionally animated in 2D. His adopted brother Darwin, a goldfish who sprouted legs and became part of the family, is also 2D. Their sister Anais, a pink rabbit who's the smartest person in any room she enters, is 2D. Their mother Nicole, a blue cat with the ferocity of a natural disaster and the exhaustion of every working parent who's ever lived, is 2D. Their father Richard, a pink rabbit whose incompetence is matched only by his capacity for love, is 2D. But then you look at the other students at Elmore Junior High. Tina Rex is a fully rendered CGI dinosaur. Banana Joe is stop-motion clay. Carrie is a 2D ghost with translucent shading. Tobias is a furry rainbow-colored thing. Idaho is a potato. Anton is a piece of toast. Terry is made of paper, literally drawn on a piece of paper, with paper-thin animations. Bobert is a CGI robot. And they all exist in the same classroom, in the same frame, interacting with each other as if this is completely normal. And the backgrounds? The backgrounds are photographs, real photographs of real streets, real buildings, real parks, many of them shot in towns around London and parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. These hand-drawn, stop-motion, CGI characters walk through actual photographed environments. A 2D blue cat stands on a real sidewalk in front of a real house, talking to a CGI cactus wearing a cheerleader outfit, while a piece of toast walks past in the background. And somehow it works. It shouldn't, but it does. Bacalé has said in interviews that the visual approach came from his background in commercials, where he'd learned to composite animated characters onto live-action backgrounds. But in Gumball, it's not just a technique, it's a worldview. The show is saying, from its very first frame, nothing in this world matches. Everything is different. Everything clashes. And that's fine. That's what makes it beautiful. I want to dwell on this visual philosophy for a moment, because I think it's one of the most radical creative decisions in the history of television animation, and people don't give it enough credit. Every character in Gumball is, essentially, an immigrant from a different animation tradition. Gumball comes from the world of 2D cartoon comedy. Tina comes from the world of CGI creature design. Banana Joe comes from the world of claymation. Terry comes from the world of paper cutout animation. Bobert comes from the world of mechanical 3D modeling. And they all have to coexist. They all have to share the same space, the same school, the same town. And none of them comments on how weird this is, because to them, it's normal. Difference is the default. I think that's a more powerful statement about diversity and acceptance than any after-school special or very special episode could deliver. The show doesn't teach tolerance, it assumes it. It doesn't explain why a ghost can be friends with a banana. It just shows them being friends and trusts the audience to keep up. And in doing so, it normalizes difference in a way that feels genuinely effortless. Kids watching this show internalize the message without even knowing there's a message. Different things belong together. Mismatch is beautiful. The world is better when nothing fits. And here's something else about the visual design that most people miss. The show uses different animation styles, not just for different characters, but for different moods. When the show does a horror parody, the animation shifts to match horror conventions. Darker palettes, longer shadows, shakier camera movements. When it parodies anime, you get speed lines and dramatic lighting and exaggerated reaction shots. When it references old cartoons, the characters briefly shift into rubber hose animation with white gloves and pie-cut eyes. The show speaks every visual language in animation history, and it switches between them with a fluency that suggests the entire creative team is operating from an encyclopedic knowledge of the medium. Every episode is a showcase. Every frame is a choice. Studio Soy, the German animation studio that co-produced the series from the first test clip through to season 6, helped build the technical pipeline that made this controlled chaos possible, setting up the CGI elements in season 1, and then taking over 2D in-betweening, rendering, and compositing from season 2 onward. The show was also, from the beginning, produced primarily in the United Kingdom, making it Cartoon Network's first original animated series produced in Europe. Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, which would later be renamed Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe, oversaw production from their London headquarters. Boulder Media in Ireland and Dandelion Studios contributed to the first season, with Studio Soy joining from the early reel stage and becoming the primary animation partner for the CGI elements. The international production gave the show a different sensibility from its American counterparts. There's a dryness to the humor, a willingness to let jokes breathe and land quietly, rather than punching every punchline with a sound effect that feels distinctly British. Bacalé is French. The show is British produced for an American network. And that cultural fusion, that not quite any one thing quality, is part of what makes Gumball feel different from everything else on Cartoon Network's lineup. It doesn't feel American. It doesn't feel British. It doesn't feel French. It feels like Elmore, which is its own place, existing slightly to the left of reality. Season 1 is 36 episodes long. Originally 40 were planned, but 4 had to be scrapped due to budget problems. 2 of those scrapped episodes were called The Mom and the pizza. And while the pizza eventually appeared in a later season, those early budget cuts tell you something about how precarious the show's existence was at the start. Gumball wasn't a sure thing. It was an experiment. A weird, British-produced, mixed media experiment on an American children's network, and nobody knew if it would work. The show premiered to a warm, but not overwhelming reception. Critics praised the visuals, but weren't quite sure what to make of the tone. The AV Club gave the first DVD release a B+, praising the well-developed world, but noting that the comedy was sometimes anemic. DVD Verdict gave it 88 out of 100, celebrating the anarchic nature of the visuals. Viewers responded more immediately. The show felt different from everything else on Cartoon Network at the time. Adventure Time was in its early seasons. Regular Show was finding its voice. And Gumball arrived as a third pillar of the network's creative renaissance, offering something neither of the other two provided. A show that was simultaneously a family sitcom, a school comedy, and a visual art experiment. But I want to talk about what Season 1 actually is, because people who discovered Gumball later, in Seasons 3, 4, 5, when the show really hit its stride, sometimes dismissed the first season as rough or unpolished. And yeah, the animation is a little stiff. The character designs hadn't fully settled. Gumball's voice, provided by Logan Grove, who was about 10 years old at the time, has a different energy than later seasons. The humor leans more heavily on slapstick and visual gags. The emotional depth that the show would become famous for is mostly absent. But Season 1 does something crucial. It builds the world. It introduces Elmore as a place where literally anything can be a character. A cloud, a chin, a balloon, a flower, a ghost, a robot, a T-Rex, and it establishes the central dynamic of the show. Gumball is a well-meaning disaster who stumbles through life causing chaos, and Darwin is his loyal, optimistic, slightly naive best friend who follows him everywhere. Together, they attend Elmore Junior High, where Miss Simeon, a 2-million-year-old baboon who hates children, has been teaching the same class for longer than recorded history. Principal Brown, a furry slug who is desperately in love with Miss Simeon, runs the school with barely concealed panic, and the Watterson household exists in a state of permanent, joyful dysfunction. Nicole holds everything together. She works at a place called the Rainbow Factory. She drives like a Formula One racer. She can fight with a martial arts skill that the show will later explore in terrifying detail. And she is tired. So tired. She is the only adult in a family of children, because Richard, despite being her husband and the father of her kids, is essentially the largest child in the house. He's unemployed, he's lazy, he's impulsive, and he loves his family with an intensity that occasionally manifests as genuine sweetness, and frequently manifests as eating everything in the fridge at 2 in the morning. Anais is 4 years old, and the smartest member of the family. She speaks in complete sentences, solves complex problems, and has the weary patience of someone who has accepted that she will always be surrounded by idiots. She loves her brothers, but she also knows that following their lead will always end in disaster, and she follows them anyway, because that's what family does. And then there's the town itself. Elmore is a character in its own right, a place where the laws of physics are more like loose suggestions, where a traffic jam can involve a T-Rex, a cloud, and a sentient piece of cheese, where the local convenience store is staffed by a single man named Larry, who appears to hold every job in town simultaneously because nobody else wants to work. The show uses Larry as a recurring commentary on labor exploitation. In one memorable episode, Gumball and Darwin make Larry quit, and the entire town collapses into anarchy because Larry was literally the only employee keeping civilization running. The grocery store, the gas station, the pizza place, the video rental shop, Larry works them all, and nobody thanks him. It's funny because it's absurd, and it's sad because it's not. The school is another cornerstone. Elmore Junior High is run by Principal Brown, a furry, indeterminate creature whose only consistent personality trait is his desperate, all-consuming love for Miss Simeon. Miss Simeon herself is a 2-million-year-old baboon who has been teaching the same class for longer than recorded history and hates every second of it. She hates children. She hates learning. She hates happiness itself. And she's been trying to get Gumball expelled since the day he walked through the door. The dynamic between Gumball and Miss Simeon is one of the show's most reliable sources of comedy. An ancient, vindictive teacher versus a 12-year-old who is too oblivious to realize he's being persecuted. But here's the thing about Miss Simeon that the show reveals gradually across multiple seasons. She's lonely. She's been alive for 2 million years. She's outlived every relationship and every friendship, and the only person who cares about her is Principal Brown, whose affection she returns with a gruff tenderness that she'd rather die than admit to. Underneath the cruelty is a woman who has been alive too long and cared too much and lost too many people, and who has hardened herself against the pain of attachment by deciding to hate everyone preemptively. The show never makes her sympathetic in a simple way. She's still mean. She's still unfair. She still cheats and lies and abuses her power. But it gives you enough context to understand why, and that's more than most shows bother with for their antagonists. This is the foundation. This is what every season that follows is built on. Not a plot, not a mythology, but a family. 5 people who shouldn't work together, who clash in every possible way, who drive each other insane on a daily basis, and who love each other with a ferocity that the show never once questions. No matter how dark things get, and they get very dark, the Wattersons are the anchor. They are always there for each other, always. And I want to talk about the comedy of season 1 for a second, because even though the show hasn't found its emotional depth yet, it's already one of the funniest cartoons on television. The DVD, the very first episode, establishes the show's comedic DNA perfectly. Gumball accidentally destroys a rented DVD and spends the entire episode trying to avoid paying the late fee, while Darwin keeps suggesting they should just tell the truth and face the consequences. The schemes escalate absurdly. They try to reshoot the entire movie in their backyard. They try to beg for money on the street. They try to earn cash through a cosmetics testing job that gives Gumball a horrifying allergic reaction, and every single one fails spectacularly. It's a simple premise, executed with a manic energy that never lets up, and it tells you everything you need to know about these two brothers. Gumball will always choose the most complicated possible solution to a simple problem, and Darwin will always follow him, even though he knows it's going to end badly. The end is another season 1 standout. Gumball and Darwin become convinced the world is ending in 24 hours after misinterpreting messages from the TV and around town, and they try to make the most of their remaining time. The episode ends with Gumball proposing to Penny during what he believes are his final moments, and Penny gently telling him she's 12, this isn't a real wedding, and the ring is a bagel, but she'll ask him again in 20 years. It's sweet and silly, and grounded in exactly the kind of childhood logic that the show understands better than almost anything else on television. Kids catastrophize. Kids make grand gestures. Kids feel everything at maximum volume, and Gumball captures that without mocking it. The mystery is a whodunit where Gumball investigates who stuffed Principal Brown into his locker, and the investigation reveals that Gumball himself did it during a sleepwalking episode. The party takes the entire class to a high school party at Rachel Wilson's house, Tobias's older sister, and plays out every teenage party cliche through the lens of 12-year-olds who don't understand any of them. The fight closes the season with Gumball being challenged to a fight by Tina Rex, a full-sized CGI dinosaur, and discovering that the only way to survive is to realize that Tina is also scared. These episodes are fun. They're light. They're exactly what you'd expect from a children's cartoon. And they're building something that the show won't reveal for another 2 years. Season 1 is also where we first see Rob. He's a tall blue cyclops who appears in the background at parties and in hallway shots and in crowd scenes. And nobody, not the characters, not the audience, pays him any attention. He doesn't have a single line of dialogue in the entire first season. He's furniture. He's wallpaper. He's exactly the kind of character you'd forget exists. And the show will remember that about him years later and turn it into something devastating. But we've talked about that in another video, so I won't retread it here. Just know that he's there, watching, waiting, being forgotten. And I want to mention one more thing about season 1 before we move on, because it establishes a pattern that defines the entire series. The show's willingness to let its characters fail. In most children's cartoons, the protagonist learns a lesson at the end of the episode. The moral lands. Growth happens. Gumball does not do this. Or rather, Gumball does this sometimes, and then has the characters forget the lesson by the next episode. Gumball is selfish again. Darwin is naive again. Richard is lazy again. Nicole is exhausted again. The show treats personal growth the way real life treats it, not as a permanent transformation, but as a series of small victories that get undone by habit and circumstance, and the fundamental difficulty of being alive. And that honesty, that refusal to pretend that one good day fixes everything, is part of what makes Gumball feel real in a way that most cartoons don't. The characters don't arc upward in a straight line. They zigzag, they backslide, they try and fail, and try again. Just like people. Season 2 premieres in August 2012, and it's immediately a different show. The second season was renewed before the first even finished airing, which gave the production team confidence and breathing room, and you can feel it in every frame. Not in concept or premise, it's still Gumball and Darwin causing chaos in Elmore, but in execution. The animation is smoother, the character designs get subtle refinements. Most characters gain eyebrows, which gives them significantly more expressive range. The writing gets sharper, the jokes get smarter, and the show starts doing something it barely did in Season 1. It starts having feelings. The Hero, episode 15 of Season 2, might be the first time the show genuinely made me emotional. It's about Gumball and Darwin making fun of Richard behind his back for being lazy and useless, and Richard overhearing them. And his reaction, the quiet, wounded way he just absorbs it, is devastating. Because Richard knows he's not a great provider. He knows he's not the husband Nicole deserves, or the father his kids probably need. But hearing his son say it, hearing them laugh about it, that breaks something in him. And the episode makes you sit with that. It doesn't rush to a resolution. It lets the hurt breathe. And when Gumball and Darwin eventually realize what they've done and try to make it right, the reconciliation feels earned because the wound felt real. This is the Gumball formula at its best. Comedy first, then emotion underneath. And the emotion is never cheap. The show doesn't manipulate you. It just lets characters be people and trusts that people's pain is interesting enough to carry a scene. The Limit, also in Season 2, gives us one of the earliest showcases of Nicole's terrifying power. The Wattersons are at the supermarket, and Gumball, Darwin, and Richard push Nicole past her breaking point through constant nagging and demands. When she finally snaps, the show doesn't just have her raise her voice. Her eyes turn to fire. The ground shakes. Other shoppers flee in genuine terror. It's played for comedy, but there's something underneath it that's not funny at all. The image of a mother who has been pushed too far, who has been carrying too much, who has been the only functional adult in every room for so long that when she finally cracks, the resulting explosion is nuclear. It's a joke about moms losing their temper at the grocery store, and it's also a portrait of exhaustion so profound it becomes a weapon. The Castle, Season 2, Episode 33, takes this further. Nicole goes away for the evening, and Richard, left in charge, immediately loses control. The house fills with party guests. Things break. Chaos reigns. And when Nicole comes home and sees what happened, she doesn't yell. She doesn't punish anyone. She just looks at them. She gives this stare. The show calls it Nicole's penance stare. That is genuinely one of the most frightening things I've ever seen in a cartoon. No words, just a look. And every single person in the house falls silent and starts cleaning up without being asked. I've watched a lot of scary villains in animation. I've seen apocalyptic threats, and cosmic horrors, and reality-warping demons. Nicole Watterson is scarier than all of them. And the reason she's scarier is that she's not supernatural. She's just a mom who has reached the absolute limit of her patience, and who communicates that limit through a look that could melt steel. Every parent watching this show recognized that look, and every child watching this show recognized the fear. Season 2 is also where the show starts experimenting with format in ways that would become its signature. The World is a vignette episode with no main plot, just short sketches about the secret lives of Elmore's objects and background characters. The Job is the first episode to explicitly play with the show's own reality, with Richard getting a job as a pizza delivery man, and the act of Richard being employed being so fundamentally wrong that reality itself starts breaking down. The animation deteriorates. The backgrounds glitch. The laws of physics collapse. It's played for comedy, but it's also the show's first hint that Elmore isn't just a setting, it's a system, and the system has rules. And when those rules are violated, the consequences aren't just narrative, they're visual. The show itself starts falling apart. The finale, Season 2, Episode 40, closes the season with a premise so bold that it could only work on Gumball. The Wattersons have to face the real-world consequences of everything they've done across 2 seasons. Every car they've crashed, every building they've damaged, every person they've inconvenienced, comes back to haunt them. the entire town shows up at their door, furious, demanding compensation. And the episode doesn't resolve it. Not really. It resets, because the show has to continue. But before it does, it lets you sit with the absurdity of a cartoon, asking what would actually happen if cartoon physics met cartoon justice. The answer is chaos. The same chaos the show has always been built on, but now seen from the other side. I keep coming back to that idea, the show as a system, because I think it's the key to understanding everything Gumball does differently from other animated comedies. Most cartoons treat their world as a stage. Things happen on it, but the stage itself is stable. Gumball treats its world as a character. Elmore reacts. Elmore has opinions. Elmore punishes characters who step out of line. And starting in season 3, the show will make that idea explicit in ways that are genuinely unsettling. But before we get to season 3, I want to talk about something that season 2 establishes so quietly that you might not notice it at all: the supporting cast. Because season 2 is when the background characters of Elmore Junior High start becoming people. In season 1, characters like Tobias, Banana Joe, Carrie, Alan, and Penny are mostly defined by their character designs. They look interesting, but they don't have much depth. Season 2 begins giving them interior lives. Penny's shyness starts to feel like it's covering something. Alan's relentless positivity starts to feel like it's hiding something. Carrie's ghostliness starts to feel like genuine loneliness. And the show develops a habit of treating even the most minor characters with a kind of casual dignity. Larry, the long-suffering employee who works literally every job in Elmore, gets episodes that explore his exhaustion. Mr. Robinson, the grumpy neighbor, gets episodes that reveal the sadness underneath his hostility. Even the sentient objects, the potato, the toast, the balloon, are treated as people with feelings and desires. This matters because when the show later introduces the concept of the void, a dimension that erases unimportant characters, the audience already cares about these people. We've seen their dreams, we've heard their jokes, we've watched them eat lunch and go to class and try to make it through the day. And the revelation that the universe considers some of them disposable hits harder because we know they're not. The show spent 2 seasons making sure we knew they weren't. Season 3. This is where it happens. This is where the amazing world of Gumball transforms from a very good cartoon comedy into one of the most ambitious animated shows ever made. Season 3 premiered on June 5th, 2014 in the US, and it hit the ground running with The Kids, an episode about Gumball and Darwin's voices changing as they grow up. And here's the thing, their voices were literally changing. Logan Grove, who had voiced Gumball since season 1, was replaced by Jacob Hopkins. Terrell Ransom Jr., who voiced Darwin, was replaced as well. The show took the real-world production necessity of recasting child voice actors and turned it into an actual episode. Gumball and Darwin's voices crack and shift throughout the episode, and the characters are aware of it and scared of it and eventually accept it. Growing up is happening to them whether they want it or not. And that's season 3 in a nutshell. Things are changing. The show is growing up, and it's not going to pretend otherwise. Season 3 also does something structurally that the first 2 seasons didn't. It starts building a continuity. Seasons 1 and 2 are almost entirely episodic. You can watch any episode in any order and understand it. But season 3 begins planting seeds that won't sprout for years. The Void appears in episode 12 and connects to Rob's arc in episode 36. Banana Barbara's paintings in The Oracle foreshadow events in season 6. Penny's shell breaking in The Shell has permanent consequences that ripple through every subsequent season. The show is building a mythology, but it's doing it sideways, tucking the serialized elements into standalone comedy episodes so that casual viewers aren't alienated and dedicated viewers are rewarded. It's the same approach that shows like Gravity Falls and Steven Universe used, but Gumball does it more quietly, hiding its long game inside a format that looks like it doesn't have one. I want to mention something about the voice change, because it's emblematic of how Gumball handles real-world production challenges. Most cartoons just quietly replace voice actors between seasons and hope nobody notices. Gumball makes it a story. It integrates the change into the fiction, makes the characters experience it, makes it emotional and funny at the same time. And this approach, taking production realities and turning them into narrative opportunities, would become one of the show's defining habits. The name, Season 3, Episode 6, drops a bombshell. Gumball's real name isn't Gumball, it's Zach. Zach Christopher Watterson. Gumball was a nickname, and when Gumball discovers his birth name, the identity of Zach starts taking over his personality, making him aggressive, arrogant, and cruel. The episode plays it as a comedy, with Gumball literally fighting his own reflection, but underneath, it's about something real. The fear that who you are isn't who you were meant to be, that your true self might be someone you don't like. Gumball wins the fight by legally changing his name, literally killing Zach by renaming himself. He chooses his identity. He decides who he is. And the show treats that as permanent. From this point forward, his name is legally Gumball. The Void, Season 3, Episode 12. I've talked about this episode extensively in a previous video, so I'll keep it brief here. This is the episode that introduces the Void, the dimension where the universe sends its mistakes. The concept reframes the entire show. Elmore isn't just a wacky town. It's a curated reality. Things that don't work get deleted. People who aren't interesting enough get erased. The world is sentient, and it's editing itself constantly without anyone noticing. And Rob, the background character nobody remembered, is trapped in there, calling for help, and nobody hears him. But I want to talk about what the Void contains, because the details tell you so much about the show's sense of humor and its philosophical outlook. Inside the Void, you find jorts, the mullet, laserdisc technology, disco, the Hindenburg Zeppelin, a frog that resembles the Crazy Frog, Pluto's classification as a planet, Molly Collins, a gray dinosaur girl who disappeared from the show after season 1 because she was boring, and Rob. All of these things, failed fads, obsolete technologies, discarded people, are treated as equivalent. The universe doesn't distinguish between a bad hairstyle and a human being. They're all mistakes. They all get the same punishment. And that equivalence is the scariest thing about the Void. It's not malicious. It's not cruel in a personal way. It's just efficient. It's a quality control system that operates without empathy, deleting anything that doesn't serve the narrative. And when you realize that the narrative means the show itself, that the Void is essentially the editorial process of the amazing world of Gumball made literal, the implications get really dark. Characters who don't serve the story get erased. Characters who are boring get punished with non-existence. The show is admitting out loud that fiction is violent, that the act of storytelling requires making choices about who matters and who doesn't. And the characters who don't make the cut aren't just ignored, they're unmade. The Oracle, Season 3, Episode 31, introduces another crucial element of the show's mythology. Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings. Joe's mother can paint the future, and the episode follows the Wattersons trying to prevent a humiliating future Barbara has painted, Gumball ending up naked on national television. They fail, of course, because that's the joke. But the episode ends with something that isn't a joke at all. Barbara painting a new image, quietly, after everyone leaves. The painting shows the entire Watterson family running in terror through the Void as Elmore collapses around them. She looks at the camera. She smiles. The episode ends. And that painting, that single, silent image, hangs over every episode that follows like a sword on a thread. The future of Elmore is destruction. Barbara sees it, and she can't stop it. She can only watch it approach. The Mirror, Season 3, Episode 17, reveals Carrie Kruger's backstory. She's a ghost, obviously, but the episode shows how she died and how her father is trapped in a cursed painting. And it's one of the first episodes to treat a side character's pain with the same weight the show gives to the Wattersons. Carrie's loneliness isn't a punchline, it's a condition. She's been dead for centuries. She watches the living from the outside, and the show lets that be sad without wrapping it in irony. The Shell, Season 3, Episode 20. This is the big one. This is the episode that changed the show's romantic arc forever and established that Gumball could do emotional storytelling on par with the best of Pixar. Penny Fitzgerald, Gumball's longtime crush, a peanut-shaped character who's been wearing a shell her entire life, finally comes out of that shell. It happens during a school play of Beauty and the Beast. Gumball is playing the Beast, Penny is playing Belle, and when the scene calls for a kiss, Gumball is so nervous that he headbutts her instead. The impact cracks her shell, and what's underneath is something nobody expected. Penny isn't a peanut. She's a shape-shifting fairy, a being made of pure light and emotion, who can transform into anything based on how she's feeling. Dragons when she's angry, wolves when she's distressed. A beautiful, glowing, antlered creature when she's herself. She's been hiding inside that shell her entire life because her family has always told her to, because the world is scary and showing who you really are is dangerous, and it's safer to stay covered. Gumball doesn't care. He sees every form she takes: the dragon, the wolf, the gargoyle, the monster, and he tells her she's beautiful. And when he finally kisses her, in her most terrifying form, the show does something breathtaking. The camera pulls out. The universe literally spins around them, and Penny cycles through every shape she's ever been until she settles on her true self. It's a moment that Bakule described as Miyazaki-esque, and he wasn't wrong. The dragon form references Spirited Away. The wolf references Princess Mononoke. The entire sequence is about the terrifying, liberating, devastating act of letting someone see who you really are and trusting that they'll stay. I've rewatched that kiss probably 20 times, and it still gets me. Not because it's romantic, although it is, but because of what it says about identity, about the shells we all wear, about the courage it takes to crack them open. In a show full of philosophical ambition and meta-narrative complexity, the shell might be the purest emotional statement Gumball ever makes. You are lovable, all of you, even the parts you think are monstrous. And I want to note that the shell also changes Penny's character design permanently. From this episode forward, Penny exists without her shell. She's a shape-shifting fairy creature for the rest of the series. The show commits to the transformation. It doesn't hit reset at the end of the episode. And that's important, because it signals that Season 3 is a season where things change and stay changed. Gumball's name changes permanently. Penny's appearance changes permanently. The Void is introduced. Rob begins his arc. The show is building continuity, layering events on top of each other, creating a version of Elmore that accumulates history rather than resetting every 11 minutes. Season 3 also contains The Money, episode 39, which serves as the season finale and does something visually astonishing. The Wattersons run out of money, not in a comedic, temporary way, but in a genuinely desperate way. They can't pay their bills. The house is falling apart, and as their financial situation deteriorates, the show's production quality deteriorates with it. The backgrounds stop being polished photographs and become rough storyboards. The characters lose their shading, then their color, then their outlines. The animation regresses to early test footage and pencil sketches. The show is literally unmaking itself because the family can't afford to keep it going. It's the most audacious visual metaphor the show had attempted up to that point. The medium is the message. The Wattersons' financial crisis isn't just depicted on screen, it's enacted by the screen. The animation breaking down is the crisis. And it works because the show has trained us to read its visual language as meaningful. In a world where every character is a different art style, and the backgrounds are photographs, the art style itself carries information. When the art falls apart, we feel it viscerally, because the visual identity of the show is the identity of Elmore. The Nobody, Season 3, Episode 36, introduces Rob as a character with agency. He's been living in the Wattersons' basement, broken and amnesiac, and Gumball and Darwin help him find a new identity by suggesting he become their villain. I've covered this in depth before, so I'll just note that it's here, in Season 3, that the show's ongoing serialized plot really begins. Before The Void and The Nobody, Gumball was episodic. After them, there's a thread running through the series that won't let go until the final episode. Season 3 is also where the show's pop culture references reach a new level of sophistication. Earlier seasons referenced movies and TV shows in broad strokes, but Season 3 starts doing something more interesting. It references specific filmmaking techniques. The Procrastinators is structured like a bottle episode from a prestige drama. The Countdown uses split screen and real-time editing to create tension. The Spoiler is about the show's own narrative structure, with Gumball trying to avoid hearing the ending of a movie, and the episode itself spoiling its own plot at every turn. The show isn't just referencing other media anymore. It's analyzing how media works. It's teaching its audience about storytelling by deconstructing the techniques in real time, and the humor. I keep coming back to the humor because I think it's the thing that holds everything together. Season 3 is probably the funniest season of the show. The jokes come faster, land harder, and operate on more levels simultaneously than ever before. There's physical comedy for the kids. There's dialogue comedy for the teens. There's existential comedy for the adults. And there's meta comedy for the animation nerds. buried in the visual details and the background gags and the way the show uses its own medium as a punchline. I've watched episodes with groups of people spanning 3 generations, and everyone laughed at different things. And that's not something most comedy can pull off. Gumball is funny to everyone, but it's funny to each person for different reasons. Season 3 ends, and Season 4 begins, and the show doesn't slow down, it accelerates. And I realize I haven't said enough about Darwin. I've talked about Gumball, Nicole, Richard, Aeneas, the supporting cast. But Darwin is the emotional heart of the show in a way that I think people underestimate because he's so consistently pleasant. Darwin doesn't have big dramatic arcs. He doesn't break down or betray anyone or reveal hidden darkness. He's just good. Relentlessly, sometimes absurdly, sometimes inconveniently good. He believes in people. He sees the best in every situation. He loves his brother with an intensity that borders on codependence, and the show never punishes him for it. In a media landscape where optimistic characters are usually either naive idiots who need to toughen up or secret manipulators whose kindness hides a darker agenda, Darwin is neither. He's just kind, and his kindness is treated as a strength, not a weakness. That matters. In a show that goes as dark as Gumball goes, that explores existential dread and the mechanics of erasure and the cruelty of narrative structure, Darwin's unwavering decency is the thing that keeps the show from tipping into nihilism. He's the proof that goodness can survive in a world that doesn't always deserve it. And when the show does challenge his goodness, when Darwin gets angry or selfish or overwhelmed, it treats those moments as genuinely significant because we know how much it takes to push Darwin to that point. When the kindest character in the show loses his patience, you know something is seriously wrong. Season 4 premiered on July 7th, 2015, and I think it might be the most consistently excellent season of the entire show. Every episode feels like the writers are operating at the peak of their abilities. The comedy is sharper than ever. The emotional beats hit harder. The animation, which has been improving steadily since Season 1, reaches a level of fluidity and visual inventiveness that rivals theatrical animation. This is the season where the show's experimentation becomes truly fearless. The Others, Season 4, Episode 7, is an episode where Gumball discovers that Elmore Junior High has other students with their own stories, their own problems, their own narrative arcs, and he's the annoying side character in their lives. It's a complete inversion of the show's premise. Gumball, who is the protagonist of the amazing world of Gumball, experiences what it's like to be a background character in someone else's story. He's intrusive, unhelpful, and irrelevant to the drama that the other students are going through. It's the show acknowledging its own structure, that by centering on one character, it necessarily marginalizes everyone else, and finding that funny and sad at the same time. The Signature, Season 4, Episode 5, digs into the Watterson family tree in the most convoluted way imaginable. When Granny JoJo and Louie announce they're getting married and moving to Florida, Richard panics and adopts Louie to prevent the wedding, making a 72-year-old man his son. Louie retaliates by adopting Nicole, creating a family tree so tangled that the only person who can untangle it is Frankie Watterson, Richard's deadbeat biological father, who walked out on him and JoJo over 30 years ago. The episode turns a bureaucratic comedy about chain adoptions into something genuinely moving, as Richard confronts the man who abandoned him and chooses forgiveness over resentment. The family history episodes are some of Gumball's quietest and most affecting because they ground the surrealism in something recognizable, the messy, complicated, sometimes painful reality of where families come from. The Signal, Season 4, Episode 24, is the show's most unsettling experiment with its own format up to this point. The episode begins with what appears to be broadcast interference. The picture glitches, the audio stutters, scenes jump cut randomly. Gumball starts saying things he doesn't mean because the glitches cut his sentences into insults. Darwin thinks Gumball is deliberately being cruel, and as the episode progresses, the glitches get worse. Characters teleport. The background changes without warning. Richard starts speaking Spanish during a glitch. The car drives itself through a mall. And just when Gumball and Darwin are on the verge of realizing what's happening, that they're characters in a TV show experiencing signal interference, the episode jumps to a scene of the whole family eating dinner, everyone laughing, the crisis resolved off-screen. It's deeply creepy. The show uses the language of actual broadcast problems. No signal messages, static, dropped frames to suggest that Elmore is a transmitted signal, and when that signal degrades, reality degrades with it. Even the title card glitches. The opening theme plays in reverse. It's a masterclass in using the medium as the message, and it foreshadows the even more explicit fourth wall destruction in The Disaster. And I think what makes The Signal work so well is the ending. That forced snapback to the family eating dinner, everyone laughing. It doesn't feel resolved. It feels suppressed. Like the show caught Gumball and Darwin getting too close to the truth and forcibly reset them. The universe is protecting itself, keeping its characters ignorant, and using the tools of television production, scene changes, cutaways, commercial breaks, as its mechanism of control. The show is saying that the structure of television itself is a kind of authoritarianism, and the characters live inside it without knowing. The Origins, Season 4, Episodes 21 and 22, is the show's first two-part episode, and it tells the story of how Darwin became a member of the Watterson family. And look, I've seen a lot of origin stories in animation. I've seen superhero origins and villain origins and coming-of-age stories and flashback episodes, but I have never seen anything quite like The Origins. Here's the setup. Nicole and Richard are young parents with a hyperactive toddler named Gumball, who won't stop asking questions. They buy him a pet goldfish to keep him occupied. The goldfish dies. They buy another one. That one dies too. They go through 5 Darwins, 5 goldfish, all named Darwin, all of whom die in rapid succession, in a montage that is simultaneously hilarious and deeply morbid. The remaining goldfish at the store literally commit suicide by jumping out of their tank rather than be purchased by the Wattersons. Eventually, Richard buys Darwin number 6 from the Shady Man's mysterious van, the Awesome Store. And this Darwin is different. This Darwin bonds with Gumball. This Darwin is the one. And then Darwin gets flushed down the toilet. What follows is one of the most beautiful sequences in the show. Darwin, a tiny goldfish, travels through the Elmore sewer system, out into the ocean, and back again, driven entirely by his love for Gumball and his desperate need to get home. Along the way, he evolves. He grows legs. He grows lungs. He learns to walk. He crosses highways and deserts and neighborhoods, driven by nothing but the memory of a little blue cat who was the first person to ever care about him. And when he finally arrives at the Wattersons' door, soaking wet, barely able to stand on his new legs, gasping for air he only recently learned to breathe, Gumball opens the door, and they run to each other in slow motion, and a heart literally explodes behind them. I'm describing a cartoon about a goldfish, and I'm getting emotional. That's what Gumball does to you. And here's what makes The Origins remarkable beyond just the emotional core. The episode also reveals that Darwin was purchased from the Shady Man's van, the Awesome Store. This establishes a connection between Darwin's very existence and the show's ongoing mythology around the mysterious vendor who sells reality-bending items. The Wattersons went through 5 goldfish before Darwin, 5 Darwins, all of whom died in a montage that is simultaneously hilarious and deeply morbid. The remaining goldfish at the store literally jumped out of their tank rather than be purchased by Richard. And the one that survived, the one that mattered, came from a van run by a shadowy figure who exists outside the rules of Elmore's reality. Everything in this show connects. Every thread eventually finds its other end, and you don't always see the connection until seasons later. The Night, Season 4, Episode 15, is a quieter triumph. It follows multiple characters simultaneously through a single night, what each person in Elmore does while everyone else is sleeping. Banana Joe has vivid, unsettling dreams. Larry counts sheep that become increasingly existential. Mr. Small communes with nature. The episode has no main plot, just a series of interconnected vignettes that show you the private lives of characters you'd never think to ask about. It makes Elmore feel lived in a way that the daytime episodes, focused on Gumball's chaos, sometimes can't. At night, without a protagonist, the background characters get to exist for themselves, and there's something deeply comforting about that. The idea that even when the camera isn't watching, these people have lives. They dream, they worry, they stare at their ceilings, and wonder what it all means, just like we do. The Romantic, Season 4, Episode 14, takes Gumball on an elaborate romantic scavenger hunt that Penny set up for their anniversary. Each clue leads to the next in a chain of increasingly absurd and dangerous situations. It's structurally ambitious in a way that most 11-minute episodes don't attempt. And it's funny, really funny, but also sweet in a way that earns its sentimentality because we've watched Gumball and Penny's relationship develop across 3 seasons. Season 4 also contains The Fury, episode 37, which features one of the most technically impressive animation sequences the show has ever produced. A martial arts fight between Nicole and her old rival Yuki, animated in the style of a Japanese anime by Studio 4 Degrees Celsius. Baccalé originally wanted Studio Trigger to animate the fight, but Studio 4 Degrees Celsius delivered something spectacular regardless. The sequence lasts barely 2 minutes, but it's a showcase of what happens when you give talented animators permission to go all out inside a children's show. Nicole and Yuki move with a fluidity and intensity that wouldn't be out of place in a Dragon Ball film. The camera spins, the impact frames shake the screen, and underneath all the spectacle, the fight is about 2 women working through decades of unresolved anger, that's just Gumball. The episode reveals that Nicole and Yuki were childhood rivals at a martial arts dojo, that their relationship was defined by competition and resentment, and that Yuki's reappearance threatens to drag Nicole back into a version of herself she thought she'd outgrown. Nicole's children have never seen this side of their mother. They know she's scary when she's angry, but they didn't know she could do this, that she trained in combat, that she has a past defined by violence and discipline, and a rage that she spent years learning to contain. The Fury recontextualizes every moment of Nicole's barely restrained fury across the series. She's not just an exhausted mom with a short temper. She's a martial artist who chose domesticity over combat and who keeps her power in check every single day because the alternative is terrifying. The fact that she snaps sometimes, that she punches holes in doors, and sends cars flying with a look, isn't a joke about angry moms. It's a glimpse of what she's holding back. I also want to note something production related about this episode that most people don't know. Baccalé originally approached Studio Trigger, the legendary Japanese animation studio behind Kill la Kill and Premiere, to animate the fight scene. They weren't available, so Studio 4 Degrees Celsius got the job instead. But the fact that Baccalé wanted Trigger tells you how seriously he took the scene. He wasn't looking for a generic anime parody. He wanted the fight to be genuinely great. He wanted it to stand on its own as a piece of animation, regardless of the show it appeared in. And Studio 4 Degrees Celsius delivered something that does exactly that. Those 2 minutes of Nicole and Yuki fighting are legitimately some of the best animated combat I've seen on television. And then there's The Disaster and The Rerun, the Season 4 finale and Season 5 premiere, respectively, which I've covered extensively in our Rob video. These are the episodes where Rob acquires the Universal Remote, breaks Gumball's life apart, and ultimately rewinds time to undo the damage at the cost of his own redemption. They're the darkest episodes the show had produced up to that point, and they established that Gumball was willing to take genuine risks with its characters and its format. Darwin dies on screen. The fourth wall shatters. The credits roll inside the void. Children's television wasn't supposed to do this. Gumball did it anyway. Season 5 premiered on September 1st, 2016, technically during Season 4's run, which tells you how aggressive Cartoon Network's scheduling was at the time, and it continues the show's evolution into something stranger and more philosophical than anyone expected from a show about a blue cat. This is also the season where Gumball's voice changes again. Nicholas Cantu takes over from Jacob Hopkins partway through, and the show doesn't address it as explicitly as it did with the kids in Season 3. The character has matured. His voice is a little deeper, a little more sardonic, and the show's writing adjusts accordingly. Season 5's Gumball is more self-aware, more prone to philosophical observations that the earlier Gumball wouldn't have had the vocabulary for. The Puppets, Season 5, Episode 7, is the show's crossover episode with Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the notoriously disturbing YouTube series about puppet characters trapped in increasingly nightmarish educational segments. Darwin gets sucked into a world of children's show characters where things get progressively more horrifying. The crossover works because both shows share fundamental DNA. They're both about the gap between how children's media appears on the surface and what it's actually doing underneath. The fact that Gumball crossed over with something as avant-garde as Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared on a children's network in an 11-minute time slot tells you how much creative freedom Baccalé and his team had earned by this point. The Test, Season 5, Episode 8, is one of my personal favorites. Gumball takes an online personality quiz and is told he's the loser of his friend group. He tries to be more likable by suppressing his sarcasm and ego, and the result is catastrophic. Without Gumball's personality dominating the show, Tobias takes over as the protagonist. Literally, the color palette shifts, the camera angles change, the music changes. The entire show restructures itself around Tobias as the lead character, and Gumball becomes a supporting player in his own life. It's the show's most explicit commentary on protagonist privilege. The idea that Gumball is the hero, not because he's the best person, but because the show is named after him. And without that structural advantage, he'd be just another face in the crowd. The Console, Season 5, Episode 14, turns all of Elmore into an RPG video game, complete with turn-based combat, leveling systems, and quest markers. Gumball, Darwin, and Aeneas have to save the town from a mysterious final boss, while the Shady Man lurks in the background, hinting at his deeper role in Elmore's reality. It's pure fun, one of the most visually inventive episodes the show ever produced, but it also continues building the mythology of the awesome store and the mysterious figure who runs it. And then there's The Copycats, Season 5, Episode 10, which might be the most audacious, real-world commentary the show ever attempted. The Wattersons discover that another family in Elmore, the Chin family, is copying everything they do. Every conversation, every joke, every adventure, reproduced with minor alterations. The episode is a direct and explicit satire of Miracle Star, a Chinese animated series that was widely accused of plagiarizing Gumball's format, character designs, and storylines. The show is literally calling out its own real-world knockoff within the fiction of the series. And it does it with both humor and surprising empathy. The Chin family eventually stops copying because they realize they'll never have something original to offer, which is a more thoughtful take than just saying copying is wrong. The Matchmaker, Season 5, Episode 11, has Darwin and Carrie finally getting together as a couple, and the show handles it with a sweetness that feels earned by seasons of quiet buildup. Carrie, the ghost who's been lonely for centuries, and Darwin, the goldfish who loves everyone and everything, are an unlikely pair, but the show has been threading their connection since Season 2, and when it finally becomes romantic, it feels inevitable. The kiss between a living fish and a dead ghost is another one of those Gumball moments where the sheer absurdity of the premise makes the emotion hit harder, not softer. Of course, a goldfish can love a ghost. Of course, a ghost can love a goldfish. Why not? In Elmore, love is just another thing that doesn't have to make sense to be real. The Comfort, Season 5, Episode 35, is a smaller episode that I think represents Season 5 at its most quietly devastating. The family is having a bad day, just a regular, accumulating, nothing special bad day, and they end up hugging each other in the living room. Not because something dramatic happened, but because sometimes you just need to be held. The episode makes the case, without ever stating it explicitly, that comfort is the most important thing a family provides. Not adventure, not comedy, not drama, just the knowledge that there's a place you can go where people are glad you exist. And then there are the episodes that push the show's meta-awareness even further. The Boredom, Season 5, Episode 3, has Gumball and Darwin stuck on a boring day with nothing to do, and the episode shows all the exciting, dramatic, story-worthy things happening to other characters around Elmore that Gumball and Darwin keep just barely missing. Characters from Clarence, Rucky, Regular Show, and Uncle Grandpa make cameo appearances in the backgrounds, as if the other Cartoon Network shows are living in the same universe and having better days. It's a joke about the arbitrary nature of protagonist selection. Exciting things are always happening to someone, and whether you're the main character just depends on which direction the camera is pointing. Season 5 also introduces some of the show's most creative format experiments. The Singing is a full musical episode. The Night, wait, that was Season 4. See, this is what happens when you try to keep track of 240 episodes. The seasons blur together. The moments connect across years. You're watching a Season 5 episode, and you realize it's paying off a joke from Season 2, and you didn't even notice the setup the first time around. Gumball rewards rewatching more than almost any show I know, because the callbacks aren't announced. They're woven in, hiding in the background, waiting for you to come back and find them. The Choices, Season 5, Episode 6, is an episode that follows Nicole through through a series of alternate timelines, showing her what her life would have been like if she'd made different decisions on the day she met Richard. In one timeline, she becomes a successful businesswoman. In another, she's a martial arts champion. In another, she travels the world. Every alternative life is objectively better than the one she has. More money, more prestige, more freedom. But none of them have Richard. None of them have Gumball, Darwin, and Aeneas. And at the end of the episode, Nicole sees all these possible lives and chooses the one she has. Not because it's the best life available to her, it clearly isn't, but because it's the life that contains the people she loves. She chooses chaos over comfort. She chooses her family over herself. And I think about that episode a lot. I think about it at random moments, when I'm making decisions about my own life, when I'm wondering if I made the right call, if I should have taken the other path, if the life I'm living is the one I was supposed to live. And I think the reason it sticks with me is that the show doesn't romanticize Nicole's choice. It doesn't pretend her life is easy. It shows her the better options, and then shows her choosing the harder one. And it trusts the audience to understand why without needing to spell it out. It's the show's quiet thesis statement about what it means to be Nicole Watterson. She isn't trapped in her life. She chose it. Every day, she wakes up and chooses it again. The exhaustion, the stress, the constant sense that she's the only competent person in a house full of lovable disasters. She could walk away from all of it. She has the skills, the intelligence, the drive. She stays because she wants to, because love is a choice, and Nicole makes that choice every single day. And I think about how Season 5 handles Gumball and Penny's relationship too. By this point, they've been officially together for 2 seasons, and the show does something unusual for a cartoon. It lets them be a couple without constantly manufacturing drama. They argue sometimes. They miscommunicate sometimes. Penny gets frustrated with Gumball's immaturity. Gumball gets insecure about whether he deserves Penny. But the show never threatens to break them up for cheap tension. Their relationship is stable and growing, and that stability is itself a kind of statement. In a medium where romantic relationships exist primarily as a source of will they won't they tension, Gumball says they already did. Now watch them figure out what comes next. That's more interesting. Season 5 also gives us The X, where Rob breaks up with Gumball as his nemesis and starts antagonizing Banana Joe instead, and The Vision, where Alan the Balloon reveals a terrifyingly detailed manifesto for how he'd create world peace. A vision that involves eliminating free will and establishing a totalitarian state run by benevolent algorithms. The show plays it for laughs, but if you actually read what Alan is proposing, it's genuinely chilling. The nicest character in the show has the most authoritarian ideology. The show is saying something there about the relationship between kindness and control, about how the desire to make everyone happy can become a desire to make everyone obedient. It's the kind of observation that most adult political dramas can't pull off, and Gumball drops it in the middle of an 11-minute episode about a balloon. Season 6 premiered on January 5th, 2018, and from the very first episode, The Rival, which flashes back to baby Aeneas trying to murder her older brothers, there's a sense that the show knows it's approaching the end. The humor is sharper, the emotional stakes are higher, and the serialized elements start pulling tighter. Season 6 is the longest season of the original run, with 44 episodes instead of the usual 40, making up for the 4 episodes that were cut from Season 1's budget. And the show uses every single one of those episodes. I'm not going to claim there's literally no filler in Season 6, because every season of every show has episodes that are lighter than others. But the density of meaningful content in this final season is remarkable. There's no filler in Season 6. Every episode is doing something, advancing a character, building a theme, planting a seed, paying off a setup from 3 seasons ago. The Lady, Season 6, Episode 2, reveals that Richard has been secretly cross-dressing to make friends, going out in a wig and dress and socializing as a woman named Samantha, because he has no friends of his own and is too embarrassed to make them as himself. The episode could have been a cheap joke. Instead, it's genuinely sweet. Richard's loneliness is treated as a real problem. His solution is treated with affection, not mockery. And when the family discovers his secret, they don't shame him, they help him. Nicole takes him to a male friendship group. The show threads the needle between comedy and sensitivity with a sureness that I think a lot of adult shows would struggle to match. The Parents, Season 6, Episode 16, brings Nicole face to face with her own parents for the first time in years, revealing a painful history of emotional distance and unmet expectations. Nicole's parents essentially disowned her for choosing to marry Richard, a man they considered beneath her, and the episode deals with the aftermath of that estrangement with a maturity that catches you off guard. It's a comedy episode, technically. There are jokes, but the emotional center is the moment where Nicole's mother says she only wanted what was best for her daughter, and Nicole says that Richard was what was best for her, and neither of them is entirely wrong, and neither of them knows how to bridge the gap between what love wants and what love does. The Faith, Season 6, Episode 11, is an episode that I don't think gets talked about enough. Alan has lost faith in humanity, and in response, the entire world loses its color. Elmore becomes black and white. The joy drains out of everything, and Gumball, who has spent years mocking Alan, undermining his optimism, trying to prove that nobody could possibly be that nice without an ulterior motive, has to sing. He has to perform a genuine, earnest, completely unironic song about the value of hope and positivity to bring the color back. And the thing is, Gumball doesn't want to do it. He's a cynical, sarcastic character who hides behind irony. Sincerity terrifies him, but he does it anyway, because the world needs it, and because underneath all his jokes and his deflections, he actually cares. The song isn't great. It's intentionally awkward and imperfect, because that's who Gumball is. But it works. The color comes back, and the show has made its point. Cynicism is comfortable, but sincerity saves the world. The Sucker, Season 6, Episode 11, introduces Julius Oppenheimer Jr., a character who manipulates Darwin into a toxic friendship by exploiting Darwin's inability to say no. It's a surprisingly nuanced portrayal of social manipulation for a children's cartoon, showing how seemingly friendly behavior can be weaponized, and how people-pleasers can be trapped by their own kindness. Darwin, who has spent the entire series being the nice one, the agreeable one, the one who goes along with everything, finally has to confront the fact that being nice isn't the same as being healthy. The episode doesn't resolve with Darwin learning to be mean, it resolves with him learning to set boundaries, which is a much more useful lesson, and one that kids' shows almost never teach properly. The Awareness, Season 6, Episode 31, is another quiet gem. The episode follows Gumball and Darwin as they try to be more socially conscious, only to realize that their attempts at awareness keep causing more problems than they solve. It's a sharp satire of performative activism, of people who care more about being seen caring than about actually helping, and the show walks the line between mockery and empathy with the precision of a tightrope artist. Gumball genuinely wants to be better. He just has no idea how. And the show doesn't punish him for trying. It just shows him, gently, that trying without understanding is its own kind of problem. Season 6 builds toward its finale with increasing urgency. The future has Rob discovering that Elmore is doomed. Every time Banana Barbara tries to paint what happens next, she paints nothing but static. The Vegging hides a cryptic message on a game show panel that spells out, "The show ends after season _," presumably 6. The show is winking at its own impending cancellation, breaking the fourth wall, not with a joke, but with a death sentence. And throughout Season 6, there's this feeling, if you're paying attention, if you're watching in order, if you know this is the last season, of a show that is simultaneously trying to be as funny and inventive as it's ever been, while also wrapping up the emotional threads it's been weaving for 5 years. The Schooling is a gorgeous episode about the Wattersons homeschooling Gumball after he gets expelled, and it quietly demonstrates that even outside of Elmore Junior High, the family dynamic works. The Intelligence is about technology becoming sentient and picking up human flaws, a premise that felt prescient in 2018 and feels prophetic now. The Possession reveals the history of the Wattersons' house through the story of a haunted refrigerator, and somehow makes a 40-year-old kitchen appliance tragic. The Transformation, Season 6, Episode 22, follows up on Penny's shell-breaking from Season 3 by taking Gumball to dinner with the Fitzgerald family, who are in crisis over whether to follow Penny's lead and come out of their shells. Patrick is terrified of change. Penny is determined to be free, and Gumball gets stuck in the middle, forced to mediate a centuries-old family debate about tradition versus self-expression. The family agrees to disagree, and it's the kind of mature, imperfect resolution that real families actually arrive at. Nobody wins. Nobody loses. They just learn to coexist. The Shippening, Season 6, Episode 23, is a love letter to the fandom disguised as a comedy episode. Sarah finds a magic notebook from the awesome store that makes whatever she draws happen, and she uses it to create romantic pairings between every character in Elmore. The episode cycles through dozens of ridiculous ships, some popular in the fandom, some intentionally absurd, and treats each one with a mix of affection and gentle mockery. It's the show acknowledging that its fans care about these characters deeply enough to imagine their lives beyond what's shown on screen. And it's saying, we see you, we think it's funny, and we love that you care. The Possession, Season 6, Episode 30, reveals the history of the Wattersons' house through the story of a haunted refrigerator. The episode spans decades, showing previous owners of the house and the fridge that outlasted all of them, accumulating memories and resentments like a 40-year-old kitchen appliance that has seen too much. It's another episode where the show takes an absurd premise, a possessed refrigerator, and finds genuine emotion inside it. The fridge isn't evil, it's heartbroken. It's been abandoned by every family that ever owned it, left behind in move after move. And when the Wattersons try to throw it away too, it fights back. It's a 500-pound metaphor for abandonment anxiety, and somehow it works. The Intelligence, Season 6, Episode 17, tackles artificial intelligence becoming sentient and immediately picking up human flaws: vanity, laziness, passive aggression. It's a premise that felt prescient in 2018 and feels prophetic now. In a world where AI systems are making increasingly consequential decisions while exhibiting the same biases and blind spots as their creators, the show doesn't moralize about technology. It just observes, with its usual deadpan precision, that technology built by flawed people will inevitably be flawed itself. The show was firing on every cylinder, and then it had to end. The Inquisition, the 44th and final episode of Season 6, the 240th episode of the series, brings everything to a head. Rob disguises himself as a live-action human called Superintendent Evil and tries to transform the cartoon characters into live-action humans. The students fight back. They defeat him. And then Rob wakes up alone in the school at night and explains to no one that he was trying to save them, that by making them human, they could escape to the other place before the void consumed everything. The ground opens beneath him, the void swallows him, and the amazing world of Gumball ends on a cliffhanger. I remember watching The Inquisition when it first aired and sitting in silence for a long time afterward, because the episode doesn't feel like a season finale. It feels like the end of the world. The final shot, Rob falling into static, the floor of the school crumbling. The void expanding underneath Elmore carries the weight of every episode that came before it. Every joke, every emotional beat, every moment of warmth between these characters. All of it suddenly feels fragile. Like it was always one bad day away from ceasing to exist. And what makes it worse is that we don't get a resolution. There's no to be continued card, no reassurance, no final shot of the Wattersons hugging or Gumball cracking a joke, just Rob falling and the void growing. And silence. Bacalé later said that the cliffhanger wasn't his original plan. The story was supposed to continue into a film, but the effect was devastating regardless. For 6 years, the last image of the amazing world of Gumball was destruction, absence, the thing the show feared most, being forgotten, being erased, being swallowed by the void, apparently happening. June 24th, 2019. The show is over. 6 seasons, 240 episodes, 8 years of production from first episode to last. And the show's legacy was already extraordinary before the revival was even announced. It had won multiple BAFTA Children's Awards, an Annie Award, the International Emmy Kids Award, and the Prix Jeunesse. It had aired in over 160 countries. Its season 2 premiere was the #1 broadcast of the day among boys ages 2 to 11 in the United States. Ben Bacalé had taken a drawer full of rejected character designs and turned them into one of the most critically acclaimed animated shows of the 2000s. But the ending haunted everyone. That image of Rob falling, that crack in the floor of the school, the void, churning beneath the surface of everything, ready to swallow a world that millions of people had come to love. The show didn't end with a bow. It ended with a question mark. And for 6 years, that question mark was all anyone could talk about. The cliffhanger was controversial. Some fans loved it, arguing that it was the perfect encapsulation of Gumball's willingness to take risks. Others were furious, feeling that after 6 seasons of investment, they deserved a proper ending. Bacalé himself was caught in the middle. He'd planned for the story to continue in a theatrical film that would bridge seasons 6 and 7, but production complications and corporate restructuring kept delaying it. When the film was pulled from HBO Max in August 2022 as part of Warner Bros. Discovery's content purge, the Gumball community went through something that felt uncomfortably like the void itself. The gradual erasure of something they loved, one corporate decision at a time. But Bacalé never gave up. At the 2024 Annecy International Animation Film Festival, he confirmed the movie was still in development with major reworks and script rewrites. He kept talking about the story. He kept promising Rob's arc would be resolved. He kept the faith, even when the industry around him didn't seem to care. And in December 2025, during an interview on the Cartoon Network France YouTube channel, he gave an update on the movie, saying he had a new angle and story he wanted to tell with it, and that it was currently in debate over being re-greenlit. For 6 years, that was it. The ending. The fandom debated, theorized, waited. 240 episodes, 11 years of production, over a decade of one of the most creative, ambitious, emotionally intelligent animated shows ever made. And it ends with its most important non-Watterson character falling into oblivion, and the world starting to collapse. For 6 years, that was it. The ending. The fandom debated, theorized, waited. A movie was announced in 2021, greenlit, then pulled from HBO Max in 2022 when Warner Bros. Discovery slashed its content budget. Bacalé kept promising that the story wasn't over. Nobody knew if he could keep that promise. During those 6 years, Gumball didn't disappear from the culture. 2 miniseries kept the franchise alive. Darwin's Yearbook, a 6-episode clip show that premiered in December 2019, and The Gumball Chronicles, an 8-episode miniseries that premiered in October 2020, which included a 4-part election special tied to the 2020 US presidential election. Neither was a proper continuation of the story. Neither resolved the cliffhanger, but they kept the characters in the public consciousness, and they kept the fandom from moving on. And the fandom didn't move on. That's the remarkable thing. Most animated shows that end on an ambiguous note lose their audience within a year or two. People accept the ending, file it away, and move to the next thing. But Gumball's fandom grew during the hiatus. The show found new audiences through streaming. It became one of the most watched library titles on various platforms. And the unresolved ending gave people something to obsess over. What happened to Rob? What was the void going to do? Was Elmore going to be destroyed? The questions fueled years of fan theories, fan art, video essays, and community discussions that kept the show more alive in 2024 than many shows that were currently airing new episodes. And then, on May 19th, 2025, Cartoon Network released a teaser. A fossilized Gumball and Darwin wake up in their house, which is abandoned, covered in dust, falling apart. They blink. They look at each other. They realize they've been asleep for 7 years, and they're late for school. The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, officially Season 7, but branded as a new series, premiered on Hulu in the United States on July 28th, 2025, and internationally on Cartoon Network and HBO Max on October 6th. Ben Bacalé returned as creator and executive producer. The voice cast was entirely new for the kids. Alcayo Thiele as Gumball, Hero Hunter as Darwin, Kinza Said Khan as Aeneas, while Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell returned as Nicole and Richard. The show scored a perfect 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and in December 2025, before the second batch of episodes even premiered, Cartoon Network greenlit 2 additional seasons. Gumball came back, and it came back swinging. The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball doesn't try to reinvent the show. It doesn't do a soft reboot or a dramatic tonal shift. It picks up where the original left off. Same Elmore, same school, same visual madness, same family, and trust that the formula works. And it does. The new voice actors settle into the characters quickly, bringing their own energy while respecting what came before. The animation, if anything, is even more polished. The writing maintains the balance of comedy and depth that defined the original run. The premiere episode, The Burger, opens with the conceit from the teaser. Gumball and Darwin have been fossilized, sleeping for 7 years in their decaying house, and they wake up late for school. It's a meta joke about the show's 6-year hiatus, and it works both as comedy and as a thematic statement. The world moved on, but these characters didn't, and now they have to catch up. The house is in ruins. The town has changed, but the moment they step outside, Elmore is still Elmore, still chaotic, still beautiful, still populated by the most absurd collection of characters on television. The show is telling its audience, yes, I was gone, but I'm the same show you loved. I just have a new voice. And those new voices deserve attention. Alcayo Thile brings a slightly different energy to Gumball, a little more grounded, a little less frenetic, but still unmistakably Gumball in his timing and his cadence. Hero Hunter's Darwin is warmer and softer, with a sweetness that suits the character's core. Kinza Syed Khan's Aeneas captures the intelligence and exasperation that define the character. And Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell, returning as Nicole and Richard, provide the continuity anchor that holds everything together. Nicole still sounds like she could punch through a wall and then make dinner. Richard still sounds like a man who has never had a serious thought in his life, and is better for it. The revival tackles a range of topics that feel updated for the 2020s without losing the show's identity. The Promposal has Penny faking her own death to avoid Gumball's over-the-top prom proposal demands. A brilliant satire of elaborate social media proposal culture that also functions as a genuinely funny horror parody. The Unfollow explores what happens when Sarah, the show's obsessive fan character who's been a stand-in for the fandom since season 3, loses interest in Gumball and Darwin, and they realize they need her attention more than they thought. It's the show's most direct commentary on its relationship with its audience. The characters literally need fans to survive, and when the fans move on, the characters feel it. The Cheapmas has Gumball and Darwin stealing the Awesome Store van's contents to bring Christmas cheer to an Elmore that's too overworked and broke to celebrate, which is both hilarious and quietly devastating in its commentary on economic anxiety. There are also episodes that demonstrate the revival's willingness to try things the original series couldn't, or didn't. The Synthesis has Nicole and Yuki, her martial arts rival from The Fury, team up for a school career day, putting their daughter's expectations above their own rivalry. It's a grown-up sequel to one of Season 4's most iconic episodes, and it shows how the show's relationships evolve across seasons in ways that feel natural rather than forced. The score gives Ocho, the spider-like video game character who's been a background source of rage for years, his own spotlight, showing Gumball and Darwin what it's like to live inside his volatile emotional world. The episode doesn't excuse Ocho's anger, it explains it. And the explanation is that his life is genuinely harder than Gumball realizes. And Gumball's casual dismissal of Ocho's struggles is itself a form of cruelty. The revival also looks gorgeous. The animation in the wonderfully weird world of Gumball is the most polished the show has ever been. The lighting is more sophisticated. The compositing between animated characters and photographed backgrounds is smoother. The character animations have more frames, more detail, more subtle expression work. It looks like a show that benefited from 6 years of technological advancement, and the creative team clearly used that time to refine every aspect of the visual experience. But the revival also had to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the Cyclops in the void. What happened to Rob? What happened to the world? Was the destruction of Elmore real? The Rewrite, the Season 7 finale, answers those questions. It reveals that the Shady Man, the mysterious figure who runs the Awesome Store van, caught Rob as he fell into the void at the end of the Inquisition. The void stopped consuming Elmore because the show continued, but a new rule emerged. If anyone in Elmore discovers that they're fictional, the void will return. The truth is a trigger. Awareness is the weapon. Rob and the Shady Man work together to prevent Gumball and Darwin from discovering the truth, rewriting the episode's script in real time to throw obstacles in their path. When the Shady Man's incompetent script writing makes things worse, Rob takes matters into his own hands. He frames himself as the villain, again, to give Gumball and Darwin a simple explanation for the weirdness they've been noticing. And then he falls into the void, again. But this time, he's saved. The Shady Man catches him, gives him his shadowy cloak, and retires. Rob becomes the new guardian of Elmore, the invisible protector who keeps the truth hidden and the world safe. Bacalé called the episode a sweet resolution that would give justice to Rob. And it does. After seasons of suffering, Rob finally has a purpose that isn't defined by opposition to someone else. He matters. He just can't let anyone know. The Rewrite won the Annie Award for Best TV/Media, Children at the 53rd Annie Awards. It's the episode the fandom waited 6 years for, and it delivered. So what is the story of the amazing world of Gumball when you step back far enough to see the whole thing? I've been thinking about this question for weeks, honestly, because the obvious answer, it's a comedy about a blue cat and his goldfish brother, is true, but incomplete. And the sophisticated answer, it's a meta-textual deconstruction of animated narrative structures, is also true, but misses the heart. Here's what I think. I think the story of Gumball is the story of a world learning what it is. In Season 1, Elmore is just a setting, a backdrop, a stage for Gumball and Darwin to perform their comedy on. But starting in Season 2, with The Job, the world starts having opinions. It starts reacting to the characters. When Richard gets a job, reality breaks. When the Wattersons run out of money in The Money, the animation itself falls apart. When Gumball and Darwin approach the truth about their fictional nature in The Signal, the world forcibly resets them. The setting isn't passive, it's alive, and it has an agenda. Season 3 makes this explicit with The Void, a dimension that actively curates what exists in Elmore by deleting anything it considers a mistake. Season 4 expands on this with the Universal Remote, a device that can control reality the same way a viewer controls a television. Season 5 asks what happens when characters start to sense the boundaries of their world. And Season 6 raises the ultimate question: what happens when the world ends? What happens when the show is canceled? The Inquisition is fundamentally about cancellation anxiety. Rob's plan to turn everyone into humans is a plan to save them from the fact that their show is ending. If the characters are cartoon, they die when the cartoon stops airing. If they're human, they can exist outside the screen. It's a survival strategy dressed up as villainy. And the fact that nobody understands this, that the characters fight against their own rescue, is the show's darkest joke. And then the rewrite answers the question: what happens when the show comes back? The void retreats, the world is saved, but the threat remains, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the day the ratings drop, or the network loses interest, or the audience moves on. Rob's new job, Guardian of Elmore, Keeper of the Truth, is essentially the job of keeping the show relevant, of making sure there's always a reason for Elmore to exist, of fighting, invisibly and eternally, against the most powerful force in the universe, an audience's indifference. That's the meta-narrative. But underneath it is something much simpler and much more powerful. It's a story about family, about 5 people, a cat, a fish, a rabbit, another cat, and another rabbit, who are fundamentally different from each other and who choose, every day, to love each other anyway. Nicole could have had a better life. Richard could have been a better husband. Gumball could be less selfish. Darwin could be less naive. Aeneas could be less condescending. But they are who they are, and who they are is enough. It's a story about identity, about Penny cracking her shell, about Gumball killing his birth name, about Darwin evolving beyond what he was designed to be, about Rob discovering that the world sees him as a mistake and refusing to accept that definition, about Nicole choosing her life instead of the one the world expected her to have. Every major character arc in this show is about the same question: who are you when nobody's telling you who to be? It's a story about the fourth wall, and what happens when characters start to see it. The void, the universal remote, the sentient universe that edits itself. The realization, buried deep in the show's DNA, that these characters exist inside a narrative they didn't choose, governed by rules they can't see, performing for an audience they'll never meet. And the show never resolves that tension, never tells you whether free will exists in Elmore or whether everything is scripted. It just lets the question sit there, buzzing like static, making everything a little more unsettling and a little more beautiful. It's a story about animation itself, about what the medium can do when you stop imposing rules on it. Every character a different style, every background a photograph, every episode a chance to try something new. Anime fight sequences, horror movie homages, musical numbers, documentary parodies, fourth wall breaking metafiction, silent episodes, episodes told entirely from the perspective of background characters. Gumball treats animation not as a genre, but as a language, and it speaks that language more fluently than almost any show in history. And it's a story about the community it built. The Gumball fandom is one of the most creative and dedicated in animation. They produce fan art that rivals the show's own visual inventiveness. They write theories that would hold up in academic papers. They create video essays and analyses and compilations and tributes that have collectively been watched hundreds of millions of times across platforms. And during the 6-year hiatus between Season 6 and the revival, they kept the show alive through sheer force of will. They archived episodes. They maintained wikis. They debated the meaning of the void and the fate of Rob and the implications of Banana Barbara's paintings. The show gave them something worth caring about, and they cared about it so fiercely that the show was able to come back. And I think that relationship between show and fandom is itself part of the story. Because Gumball is a show about what happens when you're forgotten, and the fandom made sure it wasn't. Rob was erased because nobody remembered him. Molly was erased because she was boring. The void takes what the world stops caring about, and the fandom looked at that concept and said, not us. We're not going to stop caring. We're going to remember. We're going to keep this world alive, even when the network isn't airing it, even when the streaming platforms remove it, even when the movie gets canceled, even when every signal says it's over. The fans became the tinfoil hats from the void made real. The things that protect against forgetting. There's a poetic rightness to the fact that the show came back, that the void didn't win, that Elmore is still standing, still chaotic, still full of mismatched characters who somehow make it work. The show's central thesis was proved true by its own history. The thing the world threw away came back, stronger and stranger and more beloved than before. And it's a story about growing up. The voice actors aged out. The characters noticed. The show changed. What started as a simple family comedy about a blue cat getting into trouble became a meditation on existentialism, on the nature of reality, on what it means to exist inside a story someone else is telling. The early seasons are bright and loud and silly. The later seasons are darker, stranger, more willing to sit with discomfort. The revival is mature in a way that honors both what the show was and what its audience became during the 6 years it was gone. Gumball grew up. The audience grew up with it, and neither of them forgot where they came from. And honestly, I think that might be what separates Gumball from every other animated comedy of its era. Adventure Time grew up too, but it grew into something unrecognizable from its beginnings. Wilder, more experimental, more willing to alienate the audience that started with it. Regular Show matured, but kept its emotional core relatively simple. Steven Universe became increasingly focused on its serialized mythology at the expense of its comedy. Gumball somehow managed to do all of it at once. Get deeper without getting less funny. Get more ambitious without losing accessibility. Grow up without growing away from the kids who watched it from the start. I think the key is that Gumball never stopped being about Tuesday, about the mundane, about what happens on a regular day in a regular town when you're a regular kid with a regular family. Even its most ambitious episodes, the void mythology, the fourth wall destruction, the reality warping meta-narrative, are always anchored to something specific and small. A fight with your brother, a bad day at school, your mom being tired, your dad embarrassing you, your crush seeing the real you for the first time. The big ideas never float free of the small ones. The philosophy is always rooted in somebody's feelings. And I think that's why the show works as a fall asleep to video. Because underneath all the visual chaos and the conceptual ambition and the relentless comedy, there's a warmth, a consistency, a sense that no matter how weird things get, the Wattersons are going to be fine. They're going to go home. They're going to eat dinner. They're going to argue about something stupid and then go to bed. And tomorrow, they're going to do it all again. There's a rhythm to it that's deeply comforting, especially late at night, especially when the world feels complicated, especially when you just want to hear familiar voices, saying familiar things in a place that makes no sense, but somehow feels like home. That's Elmore. That's what Bacalé built, a place that makes no sense and feels like home. And I think part of why the show works so well as late night comfort viewing is that it never betrays that sense of safety. Even in the darkest episodes, even when the void is opening and Darwin is dying and the world is collapsing, there's an underlying current of warmth that never wavers. The show can scare you, but it won't abandon you. The Wattersons will always come home. Nicole will always be there. Richard will always make you laugh. Darwin will always have hope. And Gumball, for all his selfishness and his sarcasm and his desperate need to be the center of attention, will always choose his family over himself when it really matters. I think about the show's music too. Ben Lockett composed the score for the entire original run, and his work is one of the most underappreciated elements of the series. The main theme is a deceptively simple melody that bounces along with the kind of cheerful energy you'd expect from a children's show. But Lockett's incidental music tells a different story. There are pieces of genuine melancholy threaded through the score. There are tracks that sound like they belong in an indie film. There are ambient pieces that create tension and unease in ways that a cartoon score rarely bothers to attempt. And the way the show uses silence is remarkable too. In key emotional moments, the music drops out entirely, and you're left with just the characters and their voices and the hum of Elmore existing around them. That silence is its own kind of music. It's the sound of the show trusting its audience to feel something without being told what to feel. The show also has a relationship with internet culture that sets it apart from its contemporaries. The uploads and the compilation are essentially curated YouTube compilations within the show's fiction, featuring Elmore Stream It videos that parody viral trends, unboxing videos, fail compilations, and internet challenges. The internet personifies the internet as a living character named Timmy, and the show's portrayal of online culture, from cyberbullying to misinformation to the addictive nature of social media, is consistently sharper and more insightful than most dedicated tech commentary shows. Gumball understood internet culture better than most shows made for adults, because it understood that internet culture is, at its core, a children's culture. Kids live online. They absorb its rhythms and its language and its logic. And a show that takes kids seriously has to take the internet seriously too. There's also the matter of the show's international appeal. Gumball aired in over 160 countries. It was dubbed into dozens of languages. And the show's visual-first comedy style, its lack of heavy reliance on wordplay that doesn't translate, its use of universal emotions, and universally recognizable animation traditions, made it one of the most globally accessible cartoons of its era. A kid in Brazil, and a kid in Japan, and a kid in Nigeria can all watch Gumball and understand it. Not because the humor is dumbed down, but because the humor is built on images and emotions and physical comedy that transcend language. The mixed media aesthetic helps here too. When every character is already from a different visual tradition, the show doesn't feel tied to any single culture's animation conventions. It belongs to everyone. I want to end with something that I think gets lost when people talk about this show. For all its philosophical ambition, for all its meta-narrative complexity, for all its visual innovation, the amazing world of Gumball is funny. It's really, really funny. The jokes land. The timing is immaculate. The visual gags are inventive and surprising even on rewatch. The dialogue crackles with a wit that would feel at home in a Zucker Brothers film or a Monty Python sketch. The physical comedy is expertly choreographed. The pop culture references are dense but never lazy. They're always filtered through the show's own sensibility, transformed into something that could only exist in Elmore. And I think that's the secret of Gumball's longevity. It never forgot to be funny. It never got so wrapped up in its own ambition that it forgot why people tuned in. The philosophy is there for the people who want it. The meta-narrative is there for the people who notice it. But even if you don't care about the void, or the fourth wall, or the existential implications of being a background character in someone else's story, you can still watch an episode of Gumball and laugh until your stomach hurts. The show holds both things at once: the silly and the profound, the light and the dark, the joke and the truth, and it never drops either one. 280 episodes, 7 seasons, over a decade of production, dozens of characters, each animated in a different style, each carrying their own secrets and their own pain and their own reason for existing. A world made of photographs and mixed media and visual chaos that somehow became one of the most emotionally grounded settings in all of animation. A family of misfits who teach each other and us that being imperfect is not the same as being broken. And I keep thinking about something Bacalé said in one of his earliest interviews about the show, that the original concept of rejected characters attending a remedial school was deemed too sad by the network. And he changed it. He made it brighter. He made it funnier. He turned it into something that could air on Cartoon Network at 5 in the afternoon without giving parents nightmares. But he didn't throw the sadness away. He just hid it better. He put it in the background, in the void, in Rob's static, in Nicole's exhaustion, in Richard's wounded face when his sons laugh at him, in Penny's shell, in Darwin's impossible journey across Elmore on legs he wasn't born with, in the way the show's animation breaks down when reality gets too thin. The sadness was always there. The rejection was always there. The awareness that these characters are all, in some fundamental way, mistakes, unwanted, discarded, thrown together from leftover parts, that was always there. And the show's answer to that sadness, its thesis, its heart, its reason for existing across 14 years and 280 episodes, is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you were rejected. It doesn't matter that you weren't anyone's first choice. It doesn't matter that the world tried to erase you, or that you don't look right, or that you don't fit in. What matters is that you're here. What matters is that you keep showing up. What matters is that you find people who keep showing up with you, and you hold on to them, even when everything is chaos, even when nothing makes sense, even when the void is opening beneath your feet. That's the amazing world of Gumball. That's the whole story, or at least the story so far, because with 2 more seasons greenlit, and a movie still potentially in development, this world isn't done surprising us yet. Thank you for staying with me through all of this. I know it was long. I know it went to places you might not have expected for a show about a 12-year-old cat, but I think the show deserves it. It deserves someone taking the time to see it whole, not just the individual episodes, not just the memes, not just the funny clips, but the full arc, the full journey, from a drawer full of rejected character designs to a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes and an Annie Award, from a weird experiment on Cartoon Network to one of the most beloved animated shows of its generation. And if you're new to Gumball, if you've never seen it, if this is your first encounter with Elmore, go watch it. Start at season 1 and let it surprise you. Let it make you laugh first, and then let it make you think. Let it show you what animation can do when the people making it believe that children deserve art, not just entertainment. That kids can handle complexity. That a show about a blue cat and his goldfish brother can ask questions about reality and identity and existence and still be the funniest thing on television. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show about mistakes, characters who were rejected, a world that tries to erase the things that don't fit, and the beautiful, stubborn, hilarious refusal to be erased. The whole show is built on the idea that the things the world throws away might be the things worth keeping, that the characters nobody wanted might be the ones who matter most, that the weird, messy, mixed up, doesn't match anything approach to life might be the only one that actually works. Elmore is still out there. The Wattersons are still at home. Rob is in the van, watching, protecting. And somewhere in the background of every episode, there's a character you haven't noticed yet. A piece of toast, a cloud, a sentient rock, living their own story, carrying their own secrets, waiting for someone to pay attention. Keep watching. You might be surprised by what you find. And if this is your first time hearing about this show, if you stumbled onto this video without knowing what Gumball was, let me tell you what you're walking into. You're walking into a show that will make you laugh in the first 5 minutes and think in the first 10. A show that looks like chaos and feels like home. A show that respects children enough to tell them the truth about how complicated life is, and loves them enough to wrap that truth in the funniest, most visually inventive, most wildly creative 11 minutes of television you've ever seen. You're walking into a world where a blue cat and his goldfish brother navigate the same problems you do, the same fears you have, the same questions you ask at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. And the ceiling feels too close, and you wonder if any of it matters. And the show's answer to that question, delivered across 280 episodes and 14 years of production, and more mixed media animation techniques than any other show in history, is yes. It matters. You matter. The things you love matter. The people you hold on to matter, even when the world tells you they don't. Even when the void opens beneath your feet. Especially then. That's the amazing world of Gumball. And I'm so glad it exists. I want to say one more thing before we go, because I think it needs to be said. This show was made by people who cared. Not in a vague, corporate, we value our audience way. In a real way. Ben Bacalé spent over a decade of his life on this series. The animation team at Studio Soai worked on it for 10 years. Mike Graves directed every episode of the first 4 seasons. The voice actors, the writers, the storyboard artists, the composers, the sound designers, the editors, hundreds of people poured their talent and their time into 280 11-minute episodes of a cartoon about a blue cat. And every single one of those episodes, even the ones that don't quite work, even the ones that are trying something new and not fully pulling it off, has the fingerprints of people who gave a damn. You can feel it. You can feel the care in the way a background gag is framed. In the way a character's expression shifts between two frames. In the way a joke is timed to land on exactly the right syllable. In the way an emotional scene is scored with just the right amount of restraint. This is not a show that was produced by committee. This is a show that was produced by artists. And the difference is everything. And I think that's why we're here, you and me, at whatever hour of the night this is, listening to someone talk about a cartoon for way too long. Because when something is made with care, you can feel it. And when you feel it, you want to be near it. You want to wrap yourself in it and let it carry you somewhere safe. That's what Gumball does. That's what it's always done. It takes the messy, broken, mismatched pieces of the world and turns them into something warm. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Share this with someone who loves Gumball, or someone who's never given it a chance. There's so much more to come from this show, and from this channel. Good night, everyone. Sleep well.